If we look at all the tests for dry eyes, and there's many, many more, we now have to add osmolarity, meibomian gland functionality, lipid layer thickness, and lid wiper epitheliopathy. And I underline that because although I named it, although I guess I discovered it and published on it, we don't have a great standardized method that's quick and easy to really have it reveal its true magnitude. But the lid wiper has a major, major role in the dry eye cascade. Now, what is the lid wiper? Well, it's that portion of the back surface of the lid, the stratified epithelial cells, according to the literature, that are charged with massaging, with rubbing the tear film and protecting the ocular surface. And if you just took a windshield wiper in a car, and a windshield wiper would have a space because the arm can't hit. And the upper lid is just a device that, like a windshield wiper, is filled with oil glands and other glands to keep the windshield clean. But it must have clearance. And if it doesn't have clearance, you will have problems. And if that surface isn't patent, you will then also have problems. So how do we determine whether we have lid wiper epitheliopathy, and epitheliopathy being a pathology of those cells? Well, we stain, and we stain with the vital dye. We could stain with either rose bengal, or we could stain with lissamine green, or we could stain with fluorescein. If I had one dye, it would be fluorescein. I would prefer to use two dyes. And someone prior asked me a question about a combination dye of lissamine green and fluorescein, and that is the ideal way to go. 1% lissamine green and 2% fluorescein. The trouble with that particular product is, unfortunately, it burns. And those are all the variations that you can have. It can be very mild, it can be extremely thick, and it can have all of these various problems. Just very quickly, let me summarize what we found out about the lid wiper. The lid wiper was first presented by Parsons in 1904, and he presented it as having stratified squamous cells which were non-keratinized in order to rub. And he discovered it was a pad. Neil Ehlers in Copenhagen published some fantastic material showing that it's thicker in that particular area. But working with Eric Knopp in Germany, who's the world's leading anatomist of meibomian glands at present, on cadavers and with HR technique, we have discovered that, or he has discovered, that there's goblet cells in the lid wiper. And that is such an important discovery that he made, because that tells you that the moment you don't have ideal lubrication, you are going to knock out the goblet cells in the lid wiper, which means that they won't be secreting mucus, which means that they won't be able to hold water, which means you're going to immediately have mechanical trauma with every blink. So that is a big breakthrough in our thinking. Now we're going back to here, and now we're back to the original cascade. That was the burning, and there's the lubricity being compromised. In studies which have been done both by myself and two others, in contact lens wearers, if they have symptoms, somewhere between 60 and 80% are symptomatic versus control groups of 13 to 30%. If people have dry eye with symptoms but no signs, which are the people we see, and they come in and we don't have an answer for them, again, an astounding percentage of people are symptomatic versus the control group. And if they have dry eye with both symptoms and signs, the evidence is even clearer. And here's the secret. You require what's called hydrodynamic lubrication. And what that means is you have to have a thick layer of fluid between the lid wiper and the corneal surface. And if you don't, you'll have mechanical trauma with every blink. Here, you have boundary lubrication. The lubrication is not thick enough so that the irregular cytoarchitecture of these cells is protected. So it's really critical that we have a thick layer. Well, what happens? Well, many of you are familiar with the triple response of Lewis, 1927, perhaps an ancestor. And what happened is, if you apply trauma to any portion of the body, you have a triple response. You have erythema, you have a red flare, it goes out, and then you have a wheel, up it comes. And here you can see this red line form. Now, if we take a mechanical device which delivers a force of 15 grams to that area of the lid on a research basis, what you'll find is that prior to the trauma, that's the way the capillary bed looks, that's the vessels. You immediately have marked vasodilation after only 1 or 2 blows, and the capillary bed has erupted. And that's the start of the inflammatory cascade. And that's what happens in the lid wiper, and that's what happens on the ocular surface when the lid comes down and you don't have adequate lubrication. In a study which was unpublished going way back to 1982, we took all of the office technicians and offered them the opportunity to participate in a study, which they all were very gracious in accepting. And every morning they had a session where they had 10 blows delivered right to that area. And then before they went home, if we could catch them, another 10 blows were delivered. And within 3 weeks, they all had GPC right in that area. Which was important. The paper was not accepted for publication because the IRB was not appropriate. No, which is unfortunate because it's great information. So the question we have is inflammation of the ocular surface the cause of LWE, or does LWE contribute to the problem of inflammation of the ocular surface? Well, after 3,000 to 5,000 blinks per day, thinking about the triple response of Lewis, I think the answer is quite evident. The other point is, once you start getting these inflammatory products, they sit up in the really deep fornix. And as an aside, last week we saw an individual who came in, referred, had seen 20 eye practitioners, including 15 very prominent ophthalmologists, constant dry eye, constant pain, that she localized right up below the orbit, but all kinds of other symptoms to accompany it. She didn't have much dry eye to account for that magnitude of symptoms. I did a goggle test on her for an hour, did nothing, absolutely nothing. So I know she doesn't have evaporative dry eye. And the question is, does she have neuropathic pain? But why would it be there? So we were working, and we looked up, obviously, averted the upper lid, looked up under it as well as we could, saw nothing. And my technician, who's been with me 31 years and is very sharp, said, well, how about doing a double aversion? I said, well, that was my next step, Terry. So we double averted. And I didn't see much, but I saw a little bit of inflammation way up. Then I started to triple avert, but the fornix, the folds, Jim, going way up were just impossible. But as I was pushing and pushing with several instruments, wishing I had a third hand, I saw a glimmer, I saw black. And ultimately, to make a long story short, I took out the fattest eyelash that I've ever seen, which had completely ingrown within a fold up there. The minute it came out, she said, my goodness, I can blink. Amazing. So the reason I mention that is that sitting up in that area, in that superior fornix, is all of that inflammatory material, which results in whatever you want to call it, follicular conjunctivitis, giant papillary conjunctivitis, non-tarsal conjunctivitis, inflammation. And then you also get it sitting on the meniscus, and that's what gives you, quotes, posterior blepharitis, assuming that there is anything. So the treatment of all of this is to get hydrodynamic lubrication. Lubricating drops, if they're lipid-based, are very effective. Ointments at night are great. Meibomian gland treatment, if you improve the meibomian glands, you'll cut down evaporation, you'll increase the thickness of the tear layer, and you'll have more tears, so you will increase hydrodynamic lubrication. And then you can try to increase the tear film thickness with drugs, or you can wear humidity chambers. And a Japanese ophthalmologist for whom I have immense respect, Dr. Yokai, has developed several procedures. He's performed on about 30 people. They're relaxing procedures of the upper lid. And he has a great deal of success with it, but he doesn't feel it's ready to even publish.